Yes, the small tea light. It looks good.
Big one is okay, but the little one is
It is okay. It looks very good from here. Yeah. It will do. It will be fine. Good morning. Welcome to the UU community of Halifax. My name is Ben Robbins, and I am glad to be your minister. Our mission is to provide a community that nurtures personal and spiritual growth, practices inclusiveness, celebrates diversity, and affirms individual and collective commitment to community service and social justice. Today's service is called Land Acknowledgements and Complex Truths. Land acknowledgements can reshape our worldview, so let's talk about them in all their complexity. And I will be talking about them in the big picture, not specifically about here in Mi'kma'ki. And today is United Nations Sunday, which adds an even larger scope to this topic. Please see the announcements in the order of service, and note that today at noon we have Building Your Own Theology right here. Today's topic is what people, principles, or vision are you devoted to? And all are welcome. And also our semi-annual general meeting is happening in 2 weeks, on November 2nd after the service right here. And details will go out in an email to the mailing list. And if you would like to be added to the mailing list, please let me know, the email list. Thank you to our volunteers and staff who make our Sunday services possible. We have Riley Friesen on tech, Tristan Calloway on keys. A special thank you today to our finance committee for preparing a budget proposal for the semi-annual general meeting. Thank you so much. Thank you also to our youth and parents for a wonderful crafting night on Friday night with 9 youth. I think the social hall still smells a bit like the branches and the wildflowers that they turned into beautiful artistic brooms, seasonal brooms. Now we have Margaret Galbraith with our land and climate acknowledgements.
I should have perhaps paid more attention to the topic for this morning before I put this together, however. We acknowledge that today we are meeting on unceded territory, the ancestral home and still the home of the Mi'kmaq people. The Peace and Fellowship Treaties of the 18th century are still in effect today. We are all those of the many nations who have emigrated to this land. We are all still treaty people. Honoring our UU principle to commit to the inherent worth and dignity of every person, we have an especial duty to collaboratively move toward truth, reconciliation, and equity for all the marginalized, systemically oppressed people in our communities. We also acknowledge the changing climate with which we are living. Our 7th principle, to respect the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, commits us to recognize the effects of the climate crisis on the life about us. A famous woman who very much lived according to this principle died about 3 weeks ago at the age of 91, Dr. Jane Goodall. You've probably all heard of her and her recent death. There have been many obituaries and stories in the past few weeks about Jane, as she is universally called. New attention has been paid to the books and the films. I only knew of her as the woman who had lived with chimpanzees in the jungle and thus pioneered this way to really learn about the life of primates. However, her clear-eyed observations are part of what makes her famous today. Her chimpanzees were not specimens or numbers as animals had previously been studied. They were individuals with personalities, emotions, grief and anger, as well as viciousness and cannibalism. She has applied these clear eyes to humans as well. In New York, only a few weeks ago, during Climate Week, she was quoted as saying that we humans, we're an animal like all the others, the most intellectual of all of them, but we're not intelligent, she said, because intelligent creatures don't destroy their only home. It is that intellect, however, and her compassion that we will have to save us, the compassion that Jane has always shown for all animals. She's been writing about reasons for hope for over 20 years. Even in the 90s, she could see the evils of fossil fuels and animal agriculture, but also the promise of renewable energy to create a sustainable future for our only home. That's that intellect at work. Now, at this time, when the climate struggle seems overwhelming and negative politics seem to have the winning hand, we need more of Jane's clear-eyed seeing, both sharp and kind. She was unshaken in the view that change is always possible. And thanks to Chris Hatch of the National Observer for much of that detail.
Have to go to a mic somewhere?
You can stand right here, if that's okay.
Hello, I'm Amy. My pronouns are she, her. Our child's fighting words today, we celebrate A Dream Awakening by Elizabeth Strong, and we've adapted it, and we have used these words before. Today, we celebrate a dream awakening. Today, we worship with renewed hope in our hearts. Today, we act on audacity of hopes and dreams for the future. Today, we pray for a world of humane relations. Let us worship together and celebrate a dream awakening.
Does the sound good? Great. I'm 10 years old, give or take. In elementary school in Kingston, Ontario, the teacher tells us about Samuel de Champlain sailing up the St. Lawrence River. He takes a left at Montreal, before there was a Montreal, and he discovers a lake and calls it Lake Champlain. I and the other students scribble away at our notes. I don't know if we realized the lake already had a name. We go on a field trip to Little Cataraqui Conservation Area. The whole Kingston area used to be called Cataraqui until the French built a fort and named it after a French person, and then the British took over and renamed the place after a king. So names must be important if they keep changing them. My family goes on an outing to Deseronto, on an Indian reserve west of Kingston. What? I say, as a little kid, an Indian reserve? Just a short drive away. We get out of the car, go into a tourist shop, and it is a beautiful mix of cultural heritage and whatever tourists will buy. A few years go by, on the front page of the newspaper, a Mohawk warrior in military camouflage, eye to eye with a Canadian soldier. So it's the Oka crisis, and we want our land back. I go to university, I go into this physics bubble. I don't know if I ever think about the history of the land. Lucky me to have that opportunity, but something is missing. I feel lost, I drop out, I hitchhike across the continent. But what am I looking for? Wherever I go, people are friendly and helpful as long as they behave like I'm a visitor. Eventually, I come back because it turns out that what I'm looking for is home. Everybody needs a home. Everyone needs a place where they feel comfortable in their skin. So with that spirit, please rise and body your spirit for our opening hymn. It is number 1 in the gray hymnal, number 1, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door. A sentiment that too many people have had to pray. The lyrics are going up on the screens.
What?
We bring our hearts into the sacred space of community and open them up to each other and for each other, so that those of us who carry pain may be comforted by the presence of a loving community. So those of us who are happy might share their joy and see it multiply in others. And so that those of us who carry complex truths might find a welcoming space to process this meaning and making in your life. This is our communal well that holds all of our stories. The water can remind us of our connection to all of life and to Earth itself. If you have a joy, a sorrow, or a complex truth in your heart to speak into our community, we invite you to share and place a stone in the well. You might also place a stone in silence. If you are willing, please speak from near this well and the mic so so that the people on Zoom can hear you. So if anybody else wants to, I'll bring the mic to them.
This is joys and sorrows. Okay, I have two little great grandsons, and they are the joy of my life. One of them has already decided that he will be a musician, and he tells us that he is waiting for his legs to grow longer so he can reach the organ and play the organ as it should be played. And the other one hasn't told me anything yet because he lives far away. And all I have the telephone, and he only has the telephone, so we can't see each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Bring it up. Go up. So the Zoom people can see.
As some of you may have heard, Colin Kerr, who usually sits over there, fell near one of the elevators in the central library. Some person was rushing out of the elevator, and Colin tried to make room for him by quickly moving aside. He was not hit by this person, but in his haste to move, he fell back and hurt his hip, maybe broke it. So he's in hospital and expects to be there for at least a couple of weeks, maybe 6 weeks.
I'd like to share a joy that it's the fall and we expect to have a few colors around, but the colors this year are absolutely fabulous. And we had the good fortune to be in Cape Breton last weekend, and it was astounding. You know, I've lived here for 50 years, and it was just amazing, the colors throughout that island. And the hospitality of those people, and the whole event. This was part of the Celtic Colours Festival with people from all over the world, and also the indigenous people of Nova Scotia, particularly Cape Breton ones, were very involved in the whole event, and it just made me feel really proud to be a Nova Scotian.
Anyone else? Okay.
I'm so glad that so many people in the United States marched yesterday and displayed their fondness of democracy.
And now we have one final stone for all that remains unspoken in our hearts. And a musical presentation by Tristan is coming now. Is now time. Is it turned on?
You don't need it.
It is now time for our offering. The work of this community is made possible by donations of time, talent, and money. Thank you for however you give, and we trust that you will give however much is right for you. Most donate by a monthly e-transfer, but we also pass the basket. Today, the basket goes to our operating fund. So whatever your situation, thank you for being part of this community. So please rise in body or spirit for our offertory hymn, which is number 1011, Return Again. And instead of doing all of the repeats, we will do it as shown on the slides. So, pay attention.
Yeah, so if you're using the hymnal, we will not repeat the second half each time. I think it goes better that way. Thank you, Amy. The author Thomas King said that one of the tricks of storytelling is never tell everything at once. King wrote the book The Inconvenient Indian about how the history on this land might be more complicated than we learned at school. He also wrote a book called The Truth About Stories, where he explores storytelling. King says one of the tricks of storytelling is never tell everything at once. You tell part of the story, you draw them in, settle them down, and then you get them leaning in if you say, "You'll never believe what happens next." Has anyone read the book Keeper and Me by Richard Wagamese? You read it? Yeah. The book is a novel about a boy named Garnet Raven who gets taken from home in the 60s scoops. You might say it was stolen or kidnapped, but he got scooped. And he returns as an adult. I expected it to be a heartwarming, healing journey about connecting with his people, and it was, but you'll never believe what happens next. The first section of Keeper and Me is about Garnet's childhood after getting taken and adopted. He's playing cowboys and Indians with his friends, and they're all cheering for the cowboys, and he's cheering along, figuring he's just a brown white guy. And he gets told that actually you're an Indian, not just in the game, but in real life. And I'm going to use the word Indian or Native or Indigenous, following the lead of the person I'm referring to. When he's old enough, he runs away from home, and he realizes that to survive and be accepted, he needs to fit in more. So he pretends that he is Hawaiian or Polynesian or Mexican. He will try anything and see what works. Garnet eventually finds his way to a blues club. So a nightclub playing blues music, he immediately feels at home. He says the blues just fits right inside my head. The band members are all black. Garnet keeps going back, and he decides to give himself an afro. And he buys these bright lime green pants, and he adopts a persona to fit in. He makes a close friend, Lonnie, closer than he's ever felt with someone since he left home. Lonnie brings him home for a home-cooked meal, welcomes Garnet into his family. And Lonnie also sees through his persona and says, you can't feel like a real person until you know yourself. So Garnet, who has always gone by an alias, tells Lonnie his real name. Then a letter arrives for him from his older brother, from his birth family. It says, Garnet, come home. Garnet is now 25 years old, so he's been gone almost 20 years. He hops on a bus and goes back to White Dog Reserve. He steps off the bus, the reserve, big afro, bright lime green pants. Most of the family embrace him, but one of his brothers looks at him in his outfit and puts up a wall. There's an elder in the community named Keeper. I think the name comes from being the keeper of the stories. And Keeper becomes his mentor. Keeper says to Garnet, a lot of young adults come back to the reserve and think that learning the culture is going to be their salvation. Beat the powwow drum, learn the dance. But what matters isn't how you dance, but why you dance. Learn the spirit of the old way, allowing you to figure out new ways. That is the way to respect tradition, and that is how tradition makes things come alive. So value respect, value kindness, honesty, sharing. Live by those values, and you will dance up a storm. Garnet is welcomed into the community, but oh, those silences, the silence of repressing negative emotions, the silence of not knowing how to express what's in your heart, and still that silence from his brother Jackie. Jackie says to him, real Indians feel the rhythm of the drum in their hearts. He doesn't accept Garnet as a real Indian. Jackie and Garnet sometimes play hockey, so they find themselves one day alone together on the ice. They pass the puck to each other. And then these nudges turn into a game of chase and keep away. And they play all over the ice until they are exhausted. Jackie bear hugs Garnet, and they collapse into a snowbank laughing. Jackie says, I missed you, man. All them years, I missed you. I'm going to skip to the big finish. So Garnet, by trying to figure out his own identity, has brought new life to this community. The community honors him by gifting him a jacket. And as he puts it on, he sees that the inner lining is made of the bright lime green trousers that he arrived in. Totally honoring who he is. So there's one more piece to the story. You won't believe what happens next. Keeper tells Garnet, I'm old, you will be the next keeper of the stories. And there's something you need to know. If you want the next generation to do something, just tell them it's tradition. So that's the book Keeper and Me by Richard Wagemuse. Thomas King said that a story is a dangerous thing. And he references Leslie Silko writing about that in her book, Ceremony. Once a story is told, it is out in the world and it cannot be called back. Once told, it is loose. So you have to be careful with the stories you tell. And you have to watch out for the stories you are told. So think of creation stories. Thomas King said that contained within creation stories are relationships that help to define the nature of the universe and how cultures understand the world in which they exist. So, the earth rests on the back of a turtle. What is the turtle on? You're saying 4 elephants? Thomas King told the story that that turtle is resting on another turtle. And what is that? Yeah, and so it's turtles all the way down. Do the people who pass on that story actually believe it? Or is it a story that teaches a worldview that the Creator has deeply made us a part of nature, supported by nature? I've listened to Indigenous creation stories that I've listened to a lot of creation stories, not just Indigenous creation stories, but I've listened to Indigenous creation stories that I don't think align with our learnings from science, and they're sometimes presented as true. For example, I read 2 books this week that both authors said that their people were created on their land by the Creator. I believe that humans evolved in Africa, spread out continent to continent, and the author's peoples are descendants of those people. So I don't think that's true. I don't think that story is true, but is it helpful? Is it a big deal to believe that Creator created your people on this land and you forever have a special relationship with the land? If that's not true, and I think it's not true, how big a falsehood is it compared to the doctrine of discovery? So the doctrine of discovery was a Roman Catholic doctrine that whoever arrived here first from Europe was the rightful owner of the land. So that is false. The doctrine of discovery is a very big lie. So in the context of that big lie, I often politely listen when I hear what I consider to be, I don't know if lie is the right word, but yeah, we won't say lie, but I'll say I don't think that aligns with my understandings of science sometimes. I've heard the assertion that indigenous ways are peaceful. I think it's more accurate to say that indigenous history is full of both peaceful ways and aggressive ways. So the stories we tell are powerful. They shape our worldviews. And since indigenous worldviews have too often been silenced or misrepresented or disrespected, I usually feel like the right thing to do, the respectful thing, the relational thing, is to listen to the creation story or the history of Turtle Island and learn what I can and build relationship. And not to look too closely if I'm not too sure about the facts. One of the purposes of land acknowledgements is to rebuild pride in Indigenous culture, to nurture self-respect in people who were taught to loathe who they were. David A. Robinson, the author of 52 Ways to Reconcile, said, "I have had to work hard to feel confident in my own skin. I've had to work to find the confidence to say to myself, I'm fine the way I am. This is who I'm supposed to be." Angela Doyle Faulkner, who spoke here in June, talked about overcoming that feeling that you are not wanted. Andrea Curry wrote about discovering and reconnecting with her Métis birth mother and family after being taken in the 60s scoop when kids were just completely cut off from their culture, and they got the message that that was not a worthy culture. So I imagine you've heard this sort of story many times, and today I want to add in the complex truth that because my heart goes out to people who are overcoming what my government and my culture did to them, because my heart goes out to them, I often politely listen when I hear a land acknowledgement that I think bends the truth. I'm not suggesting our land acknowledgements do that. I'm talking about the larger system of land acknowledgements. But I will say something about our land acknowledgements. Typically, they say that we live on unceded territory. Let's enforce the treaties. Let's build relationship, make up for injustices, create good shared governments, and here's some information about Mi'kmaq ways. If you only heard our land acknowledgements, you might think that deep relationship was a unifying goal for First Nations people. Deep relationship with Canada, let's say. But for some people, the main purpose of land acknowledgements is to say, we want our land back. So the stories we tell are very different if the goal is deep relationship versus we want our land back. The stories we tell are very different if the goal is traditional indigenous culture, versus if the goal is an evolving culture based on timeless values. And the stories we tell are very different if we have a both and attitude about Western indigenous ways versus if we prefer one over the other. The Dalai Lama was speaking to a group of North Americans who were seeking a new way to live by exploring Tibetan Buddhism. The Dalai Lama said to them, anything you are looking for in Eastern traditions, you can find in Western traditions. So when I'm learning about Indigenous history or Indigenous ways or Indigenous values, I ask myself, what stories would we tell if we were trying to find the same learnings in Western traditions? What stories would we tell if this was about the spirit in me wanting to be in a relationship with the spirit in you? Earlier this week, I looked at a list of best-selling books in Canada. 7 of the top 20 books were in support of reconciliation or Indigenous ways. That's pretty awesome, 7 of the top 20. 2 other books, though, were about how reconciliation narratives bend or break the truth. I haven't read those books. I'm not suggesting you do. I don't know if they're accurate. I'm sure they're not in many ways. But I do know that the accuracy of reconciliation narratives could be a political flashpoint. So seek out and amplify the voices of people who are speaking boldly and courageously for real action on reconciliation while being careful about truth-telling. Seek out and amplify the voices of people whose stories entwine with the best of Indigenous ways and the best of Western ways. Today is United Nations Sunday, and I didn't get into the complex truths of land acknowledgements on a global scale. Land claims are a very complex business. I don't know if you saw the news about Richmond, BC recently. So I will tentatively put down that topic for next year's topic on UN Sunday. I'm going to finish with a land acknowledgement by a friend of mine. He told me years ago that I could share this, but I did not ask permission if I could say his name, so I'm not going to say his name. He is American, so it has a couple of American references. Let us remember that the native peoples on this continent were not and are not a singular culture, but rather thousands of different cultures that practiced everything from matriarchy to patriarchy, were great warriors, seamen, storytellers, musicians, and dancers, practiced thousands of years of agriculture in enormous villages and cities, as well as all variations of nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyles. Within 50 years of being introduced to the horse by the Spanish, the Comanche and other tribes developed one of the most advanced horse cultures since the Mongols. There were good people and those that struggled with their goodness. There were violent men and women and peacekeepers. Some tribes practiced slavery and torture, others adoption and peacemaking through ceremony. Many had culture acceptance of transgender and homosexual members. The Tlingit and Inuit people hunted and harvested whales using only kayak and wooden canoes. The very architecture of the US government is built in large part upon the Iroquois Confederacy, I would say Haudenosaunee, but he wrote the Iroquois Confederacy and their idea of a Senate representing their peoples. He goes on, my ancestors, the Lakota people, along with the Cheyenne, began as part of the great mound-building agricultural societies in the southern U.S. They just built huge mounds, not just burial mounds, just huge. So his ancestors were part of the great mound-building agricultural societies in the southern U.S. and later became the quintessential Hollywood Indians when they turned to a nomadic lifestyle following the bison herds across the Great Plains. Their use of bald and golden eagle feathers as symbols of successes and powers became a part of American iconography. Many of the larger tribes were themselves responsible for the wholesale murder of neighboring tribes. They lived in longhouses and multi-room homes built of wood, clay, stone, leather, and grass. They spoke hundreds of languages and thousands of dialects, cooked endless varieties of food harvested from the land they lived on, and they loved and lost and lived and continued to do these things with just as much nuance, diversity, and significance as anybody, anywhere. Many of these cultures survive today, and some were lost forever in the genocide. Let us move away from the ideas of advanced or primitive or better or worse and remind ourselves of how we need to treat each other as fellow humans and the living things around us, then and now. Do I love that? He did the land acknowledgement at my ordination. Let's take a few breaths of silent reflection and then consider if you'd like to share your thoughts with the group. Fully welcome them. We will pass the microphone. So let's just take a few breaths, and if someone is ready to share, please come up if you can so that everyone on Zoom can see. Brian shifted. I thought he might get us started.
Yeah, I really like the nuance of all those thoughts that you put together, and I really appreciate them. And one of the things that struck me was the story about tradition and future and the evolution of tradition in today's society, and how in Cape Breton, I'm sure you've all heard of the two-eyed seeing concept, which was developed by, I think Bernie Francis, but I'm not sure. And it, one of the, or no, sorry, it was Albert Marshall. Yeah, Albert Marshall. And that's a concept that's been popularized here as a way of combining old ways of seeing and new ways, science and so on, which I think is a really valuable part of local culture.
Just check that my mic's still on. This can be a tender topic for some people, so I fully honor that. If you want to check in with me afterwards, I welcome that. Or say what you want to say now, that's also welcome. Part of the reason I wanted to, Judy.
I just wanted to say that you really brought that story back to me. I had the honor of meeting Richard Wagamese at a literary festival. And I will say he talked about the petroglyphs and visiting the petroglyphs near Peterborough, Ontario, well, near the First Nations there. Anyhow, when he described them, it was the first time in my life I had ever felt the sensation of reverence. That he did that to me like he was a really brilliant writer, and we miss him.
One of the reasons I wanted to do this topic was 'cause sometimes during a land acknowledgement, I'll look around the room and I wonder, what are people thinking? Like, who here is sitting there thinking, give the land back, just give the land back? Or whatever, or who's thinking, yeah, let's do the treaties, or who's thinking, God, this is complicated, I'm scared, that was part of the reason I wanted to open this up. So if you don't feel like saying anything today, I would just love the conversation to continue. This is called Land Acknowledgements and Complex Truths, and I actually had several more complex truths I didn't get to, so I'm sure I will speak to this again.
Yeah, I really appreciated the topic and also the nuance with which you explored it. And some of it for me is what has been given space in terms of healthy practices in our society, and then also what has been woven through the institutions like the schools our children go to and all of our institutions, and then also things around oppression, dominance, capitalism. And I think in terms of some of the teachings around honorable harvest and some of those things, like I don't feel like I learned a lot of that from my culture growing up. And I've also been learning how Indigenous people influence, are woven through Canadian culture as well. So a lot of our values are actually built on a shared platform. But I struggle a little bit with the piece around who decides and dominates and who has power. And I feel like it's not an equal platform. And so I think making extra space for stories that have been absent, giving it more time and space is really important. So it's, I think, more of that and less of the stories that dominated for so long to kind of level that field.
Thank you.
I find land acknowledgements to be important, but frankly, most of the time, they're BS. Like we can, acknowledge what happened however many hundreds of years ago and not really like work to do anything about it. And I think that's what happens a lot of the time. And I also just wanted to say that I don't really believe that land belongs to anybody. And I know a lot of Indigenous cultures believe that as well, that we belong to the land. It's not the other way around. And I feel like that's just not acknowledged a lot of the time. And I think land acknowledgements are a good start, but a lot of the time they're a tool to just kind of say, look, we checked the box. Let's move along to the rest of the content we have for our day. So, yeah.
We'll go Amy and then Shriba.
I used to have care and control with the municipality of Digby of 37 acres in Bear River. And the back of the property is the Sissebu River, which, if we cross it on the other side, is what we used to call Indian Hill. And the chief's, like Greg McEwen's cabin was, if I could, go down those cliffs and up the cliffs, his cabin would be directly behind me. And so I inquired about, well, how do I give that land back? Nobody knew. And, excuse me, but capitalist that I am, I sold the property to someone that wanted to harvest the woods. And, nobody has an answer that I could find. And, if we really, truly, as settlers, wanted to give the land back, how do you do it?
Shripad.
When I hear the land acknowledgements every week, I sometimes think that the UUs belong to NATO. Not NATO in the sense of the usual meaning, but many years ago, somebody coined the phrase NATO meaning no action, talk only. So we don't do anything aside from ritually saying something every week. I would like to see us do something more. For example, maybe once a year, we should have a retreat where we go to an Indian reserve, if we can arrange such a thing. I lived in Canada for about 60 years. I never once been to an Indian reserve. I have no idea where they are, how to go there, and so on. So I would like some push in that direction. And maybe there are other smaller things we can do of that sort. Maybe once a month, once every 6 months, every 3 months. But something more than just speaking the words, some action. Yeah.
Hi, Amy asked, how do you give the land back? Well, they tried that near the Curve Lake First Nation in Ontario, just outside Peterborough. And they tried, the reserve tried to buy the land, and it created a furor in the community. The municipality didn't want to give up the tax revenue from the land base because, of course, it would become part of the reserve, and then it becomes federal land. So there was that. But there were also people in the community who were just, you were given this land, and so just be grateful. It was appalling, frankly. It's a fight.
Amy, and then we'll wrap up.
This congregation used to have a relationship with Bear River First Nation, and with the late Vitska Gradstein dying, I think, she and I, just before she died, we went down for one last visit, last visit for her. And so, I'm wondering, are there other people that were part of that first gathering of, people that got together? That, do we want to renew that friendship?
Thank you. I'll talk to you about that. So some of us want land back, some of us want relationship. Someone thinks Gus is complicated. We can reasonably agree about the path forward, even as we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person involved. And I say no excuses, keep on moving forward. Our closing hymn is called How Could Anyone? The composer of the song says that it has been sung at the United Nations and around the world to bring inspiration and affirmation to people struggling with every imaginable challenge and to celebrate the beauty of human beings everywhere. So it's 1053 in the Teal Hymnal, 1053. The lyrics are going up on the screens. All right, please have a seat. The stories we tell and the stories we take in help us to experience the inherent worth and dignity of each and every one of us. And the stories we tell shape our worldview and shape our future together. Our stories are many, they are complex, they are contradictory. Navigating a path forward will be challenging. But fortunately, we are up to a challenge, we are full of heart, and we are gladly part of the interdependent web of all beings. I will extinguish the chalice with these words. May we carry in our hearts the glow of love, the light of truth, the fire of commitment, and the power of transformation. Please stay for Building Your Own Theology right here at noon. The semi-annual general meeting is in 2 weeks after the service, and there is now coffee available in the social hall. Go in peace.